Celeste with the Celestial Report. And today, my very special guest is Sheriff Mack. And I have shared his journey through the years. And it's a real honor and privilege to have Sheriff Mack join us today. Welcome, Sheriff Mack.
Thank you, Celeste. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. And thank you so much for having me.
So I don't think that there's anybody in the truth and freedom movement that does not know who you are, but why don't you tell a little bit about yourself briefly?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I was born in St. Louis and I was raised in Arizona. We moved into my dad's actually hometown area. He was with the FBI. And so since I was 2 years old, I've been in Arizona. And I spent about 15 years in Utah, where I started my police officer career. I've done everything in law enforcement imaginable, anything and everything you've ever seen on TV. I've done it. And probably the biggest thing that ever happened to me in law enforcement is I served a year as an undercover narcotics agent. And I mean way undercover. I could rarely go home. I had 3 little kids at the time. Could not be seen with my wife or them in public. So I couldn't go to any of their things at all, any activities, any sports, any things at events at schools, nothing. I had a different name, I had a different driver's license, I had a different car. And anyway, that was very traumatic for both my wife and me. Then I moved home to Arizona and ran for sheriff in 1988. I was elected, even though I hadn't lived there for 12 years and had never worked in law enforcement there. But I was kind of new blood and I was old blood because that's where I'm from. And people didn't like what was going on in the community. And so I got elected. Then I got reelected in 1992. And in 1994, the BATF sent 3 agents to our Sheriff's Association meeting in Phoenix. There's only 15 counties in Arizona and 13 sheriffs were at this meeting. And these 3 agents of the BATF handed us a document detailing our marching orders from the federal government as to what we had to do to enforce the Brady Bill. And if we refused and failed to comply, we were subject to a year in prison or a $10,000 fine or both. And so here they are commandeering offices that have no authority, no jurisdictional authority, no authorization from the Constitution whatsoever to tell state, county employees what to do. And then if we don't go along with their ridiculous, unlawful mandate, we get arrested. So I became the first sheriff in American history to launch a major lawsuit against the federal government, the Clinton administration, no less, take it all the way to the Supreme Court and win. And I have a copy of that. I have a review highlight version of the case that every one of you should have. And this fits in your shirt pocket. It's real easy to read, but it is the most powerful ammunition you could have in your hand and give to other public officials, your city council, your mayor, your county commissioners, your sheriff, local state reps and state senators and your governor's office, and share this with them so that they can see the most powerful 10th Amendment state sovereignty decision in the history of America, written by Justice Scalia for the majority. And it was a close decision, 5-4, but we won. This decision has not changed one iota since then. And people need to really wake up because this decision is probably the most hidden Supreme Court decision in the history of America. And I've been pounding the pavement, traveling all over the country to wake people up about the dire straits that our Constitution is in and that liberty and America are dying. And we've got to wake up and do something about it. And we at the CSPOA, which I formed about 14 years ago, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, is the most powerful, peaceful, and effective solution that we have left, except prayer and begging the good Lord to intervene on our behalf. But I really don't think he will until we have repented.
Yes, I agree. I
And
agree.
so anyway, that's where we're at, and that's what I do. And I travel the country training police and public officials and sheriffs as to what their role is in preserving our God-given constitutional American Republic, and that the most important thing they can do is keep their oath to protect and defend God-given rights, the civil rights of all people, of all races, creeds, and colors.
So before we go on and talk about a recent event you just did, why don't you tell folks where you can get that little handout? Or
Sure. Okay. And folks, two things that I ask you to do when you go to our website. Every one of you should check our website out. We started another major project, and you'll see that on the front page. But the thing of it is, what we need to keep going is for every one of you to become a member of our CSPOA posse. And we have training. We just had it yesterday. We have a training webinar, our CSPOA posse webinar. Yes, every citizen can be part of this, just as we the people are the first three words of the Constitution. And so you can join there, and you can purchase these little booklets. They're very inexpensive. One is just $2. You can get 3 for $5. And folks, these are worth their weight in gold, because it has absolute proof that the federal government is not our boss, and that they only have, quote, discrete enumerated powers, end quote, as Scalia has said. The Supreme Court ruled that. And it also declares and calls us, the sheriffs that did this, the CLEOs, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer. And so we don't answer to the federal government, especially when they're outside their constitutional authority, which is just about every minute of every day.
Yeah.
So we have to have a solution. What is it? Where can the people turn for peace, safety, and liberty? And that's your county sheriff. And you want to talk with him and get a relationship with him, and you want to volunteer to be on his posse or help him form one if he doesn't already have it. Folks, we have a lot of work to do. The only way we stay funded are by the people who join our posse and pay the whopping $11 a month. And that's what keeps us going. And we bless each other at the same time. And that's an actual absolute fact. We help train you, get involved with your sheriff, who is the only hope we have left. And yes, the nationwide sheriffs, if we had just 1,000 of the 3,000 sheriffs, there would be no stopping this. So this is what my wife and I have dedicated our life to. We have other volunteers and other people that help all over the country. We have state directors that are doing a great job. We only have about 15 state directors, so we need more of those. So any of you want to work with us on that, that's great also. But folks, there's never been a more important time for our sheriffs, our constitutional sheriffs, to get going, and for we the people to join them in this holy cause of liberty. And that's how you can get involved, is by joining the CSPOA posse at CSPOA, CSPOA.org. And first, get some of these books. That's the best ammunition you can have. And then join CSPOA posse.
Yeah, I have a great constitutional library, and it would be much easier to carry that little handout than all my books, you know. If
you want to download it to your phone, please do. This is very short, and maybe you could do that. I think we have it in digital form somewhere too. We could get that to you. But folks, it's really good to have this and just hand it to your city council member and say, look, or school board members too. Celeste, what do school board members always say? Oh, we can't do this, we can't do that because we have all these federal mandates. No, you don't. We elected you. You don't answer to Washington, D.C. Actually, the Department of Education is unlawful because there's no constitutional authorization to have a huge bureaucracy like the Department of Education, as if the states can't handle their own education. We need corrupt Washington, D.C. politicians telling us how to do education out here in Arizona. No, we don't.
Yeah, and you just think about what they're teaching the kids. I
Yeah.
mean, they want to funnel them into that NEA, and what they learn there is not anything that will prepare them to
No.
live a good quality life and be a good, citizen.
Amen.
That's productive.
They, they
It's
they very rarely even teach the Constitution at all.
No, they don't. They
No.
don't. It was interesting, and then we'll get on. And I want to hear about your latest gathering. I pulled out a paper that I wrote in the '60s, and it was on propaganda, and I was surprised. I got 100% on the paper,
Yeah.
but I was surprised reflecting back, how even in the 1960s we were getting indoctrinated
Oh yeah.
into this communist, socialist, fascist
Better
ideology.
red than dead.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's a big one in the 60s.
yeah. But it surprised me, because I look back and I think, compared to my children and grandchildren, I had a very conservative. And it took my looking at my own writing to see how I was being manipulated and used as a pawn in something that I really didn't understand. So
Right.
what you just had a gathering? Tell us about it.
Well, we had a convention, conference, training, an action plan to implement, and sure enough, we've started to implement it. And it's this letter that's on the front page of our website right now
Mhm.
at CSPOA.org, and we've put together a letter to all attorneys general of every state, so that would be 50, and we haven't sent it out to anyone yet, although we're going to, and that's the plan, and we've introduced it to anybody who wants to see it at CSPOA.org. And what it is we went over, we had a lot of terrific speakers, about 6 or 7 different sheriffs and a couple of former sheriffs. And then we went over quite a bit of my Supreme Court case, because it adds such credibility to what we're trying to do. Folks, if Martin Luther King had won a case at the United States Supreme Court, and then was doing his civil disobedience and his other marches and his peaceful protests, and he had a Supreme Court decision right in his hand that he was able to show people, I think his movement would have been much more effective. Not that it wasn't effective, but it would have been much more effective if he had said, look, I know what I'm talking about, because I sued the federal government and we won, and here it is. Please look at it. And so, and I talk about Martin Luther King a lot, and also Rosa Parks. And the question is this: Rosa Parks got arrested for not giving her seat to a white man, and there was no law that said she couldn't do that. But there was a cultural norm, and she was arrested for disorderly conduct because she had the audacity to go against this norm and this custom. And even when the cops got on board, she goes, "Why can't we just be left alone?" The bus driver turned to the cop and goes, "Are you listening to that?" See, when they won't stay in their place, and see, folks, that's what they're doing to us today. We can't complain about open borders. We can't complain about inflation. We can't complain about corruption. We can't complain about the horrible influx of criminals from all over the world that have come into our country and are killing and raping and pillaging and taking over apartment complexes in Colorado. And American politicians are making sure that these people, quote, accidentally, if you find out, if you look at the news just recently from Oregon and Arizona, whoops, it looks like some of these illegal aliens were getting registered to vote.
Yeah.
And in Arizona, it's 97,000. And Oregon had, they said, hundreds. So who knows? It's probably tens of thousands. But folks, we knew this was why they were bringing them in here. And so this is what we're asking the attorneys general and sheriffs to do. Start investigating corrupt politicians wherever they are, Washington, D.C., across the nation, in states or counties or cities. And we're asking all the AGs to start investigations. We're asking the sheriffs to start investigations against the people who have aided and abetted illegal immigration into the United States, and find out their motives and find out how and what they did to bring these people in here. Folks, let's be real. These gangbangers from Venezuela did not walk here.
No, they didn't.
Some people have walked here. Most of them have not walked here. 5,000 miles with children and babies. No.
And they all have brand new tennis shoes and brand new cell phones.
Nice, yeah. But that's another point, Celeste. They are handed all sorts of freebies when they get here, including debit cards of $8,000 to $10,000, sometimes more. And so, of course, why wouldn't anybody want to come here when you give them free housing and free criminal activity? You know, there's not going to be any repercussions. Even if you murder some people, we still won't prosecute you. And if you go around beating up cops, heck, we'll arrest you and release you right then and there. You can go beat up some more. So the devastation and the chaos caused by our open borders, these criminals in Washington, D.C. accept no responsibility whatsoever for what they've done. And nobody will investigate them. Washington, D.C. will not investigate itself. And so the only way this can happen now is for the states to pick up the baton and run with it. And that's what we're asking them to do. And we hope we get a lot of response. But at least we're going to try this, and they should be put on notice. You mean you're going to say no when criminal activity is happening all around your state and all around your capital? Let's say we're talking to Denver. You're not going to follow up with criminal investigations to find out how these people got here in the first place? Start interviewing the people you've arrested or that you need to arrest. And some arrests have happened in Denver, a little bit too little and too late, but we still applaud any of the law enforcement that are trying to solve this horrible situation there. But this is just a sign of how it's going to be. And it's now going in to the rural parts of America and rural parts of our states, to small towns. And so we're asking the AGs and sheriffs to get busy on filing very comprehensive investigations, yes, against government officials who have done this. If it's NGOs who've done it, fine. Go after them and see. But you're going to see a connection between NGOs and government officials. And the corruption of Washington, D.C. is destroying America. And we've got to do something now to save her. And folks, we would love your support. And again, join our posse and become a part of this solution.
So I live in North Dakota. So when you send this letter out to my AG, how can I as a citizen call him up and really encourage him, or leave a message with his aide and say, I'm really for this. I want to protect our North Dakota. I want to protect my state against invasion, which this is an invasion.
Article 4, Section 4 says the federal government is, quote, shall protect our borders from invasion. Shall. And so they don't do it. We have to pick up the baton and run with it.
Yeah, I think they love semantics. at the federal government. And so they love to play word games. So I don't think they think it's an invasion. They think it's humanitarian. We're going to give everybody in the world refuge.
There could be humanitarian invasions. It's called millions and millions of people coming in. Okay. Infiltrating, invading. It doesn't have to be violent. There's nothing in there that says it's only violent invasions or whatever. You don't get to put your own interpretation on it. If they're coming in here and it's illegal, it's an invasion.
So how long? So you send it out to the AGs. How long does that process of investigation take? Is that like something weeks or months or?
It should only take a few weeks if they get going, but there definitely will be some rabbit holes that this takes them down. But you follow the money and you interview suspects and you interview other witnesses and victims, and you're going to start amassing a great amount of evidence. And so if it takes a few months, it shouldn't take over a few months. But you know how government works. But we're really hoping that this moves along very expeditiously and that people take this seriously. For AGs and sheriffs to say, no, I can't do that, or I won't do that, or my county attorney says I don't have the authority to do this, when the federal government is the criminal and they refuse to check and balance themselves and they refuse to investigate themselves, and yet the FBI has assumed and stolen, quote, the authority to investigate local corruption, who's going to investigate Washington, D.C. corruption? They're not going to. They're part of the problem. Yeah. And so they're not going to do that. It then leaves it to the states to do it. And to be quite honest, who formed the federal government? The states did. And we delegated them certain powers. The states delegated them certain powers. So we, the people, and the states have authority over that. And if we formed the federal government and then we gave them certain assignments, who's the real boss there? And if you read this, you'll see clearly that the federal government is not our boss. And let me give you one quote from this decision right now. Mm-hmm. Justice Scalia actually told us he was going to take us through a history lesson, and he does. And he actually goes back to 1992, which was just 2 years before I filed this one. And he goes back to 1992 when New York sued the federal government to prevent them from forcing the state of New York to accept and store nuclear waste that belonged to the federal government. And New York said, we don't want that here. They said, you have to take it because we're the boss. Mm. And then in that decision, New York won. Because one, the supremacy clause does not give that kind of power to the federal government. In fact, the supremacy clause gives very little supremacy to the federal government. And in fact, the decision also says that the federal government is no more subject to the states than the states are subject to them within their proper sphere of authority. And so you have to know and understand that the federal government has very little authority, and that's what the intent of the founders was when they formed our new Constitution and the new central government. So this is what the quote from the New York case was, per Scalia and the other four justices that did this decision. Quote, we have held, however, that state legislatures are not subject to federal direction, end quote. And then another one, the states cannot be compelled to enforce or administer a federal regulatory program. So what does that do to COVID-19 or anything else they want to order us to do? Remember back in the 70s, it was 55 mile per hour speed limits, yes, or we won't send you any transportation monies. So it's kind of extortion at the same time. Folks, this is the most ridiculous economic system I've ever heard. The IRS and others come into our states and steal money from us and take it to Washington and build these huge buildings and hire thousands of people and pay everybody exorbitant salaries. And then they send it back to us. They send us about 2% back in federal grants. Federal grants. Stop sending your money to Washington, D.C., and they won't be able to hold it over you anymore. And this IRS code right now and all that's going on with the $36 trillion debt, are we out of our minds thinking that that's okay? And the federal government wants us to believe it's okay to just keep amassing all this debt. Like nothing's going to happen. It's not a problem. Spend money you don't have. It doesn't matter. For which the rest of us would be going to jail. Absolutely. And so what do they do with all that? If you look at the IRS and the income tax, we don't even pay enough in income tax to pay the interest on this $36 trillion debt. And so what's going to happen? They're going to keep spending and they're going to keep taxing us. And pretty soon, that's not going to be sustainable anymore. And in fact, it already is not. And so our economy is living on borrowed time. And we're just going to keep watching this catastrophe take place and do nothing about it. First and foremost, investigate these people on criminal charges. This is a peaceful and effective way to put corrupt politicians in their place. And hasn't Biden and Kamala and a few others in Washington, D.C., when they're talking about Trump, no one is above the law. Well, we made that very clear in this letter to all of them that no one is above the law. Let's get them investigated and let's do our duty and let's save America.
Can I ask you a question? So I've lived in several states in the West, and they, since I think the 70s, many of them have changed their state constitutions to a more harmonized version, both with the federal government, but also the United Nations. What is your advice for a citizen in one of those states?
Well, I would say start working with your counties. General Flynn has called this local action, national impact, where you start what Madison said, we can safely rely on the disposition of state legislatures to erect the barriers against the national encroachments. This is what we can do. We can erect the barriers county by county, and we can take our counties back. Just yesterday or the day before, Indian River County in Florida declared itself to be a Bill of Rights sanctuary county. That's where we need to go and enforce that. And then sheriffs inform the state and all the bureaucracies in the state that the Bill of Rights, regardless of what you're putting out there, regardless of what you're trying to do to sell our sovereignty to the UN or any place else, this county will remain an American county. This county will enforce the Bill of Rights strictly against anyone that comes into our county. And by the way, the other thing to tell them, and this is another thing we worked out at our conference we were talking about in Orlando, that the sheriffs require federal and state bureaucrats to check with them before they come into their counties to do anything. And there's some sheriffs already doing that. It doesn't get a lot of press, but we're not asking for press. We're asking for all sheriffs to do their duty. And so this can be done. And again, it is a peaceful process. Folks, if you don't get involved and your sheriff doesn't get involved, there is no way that this remains peaceful. If you want a peaceful and effective solution, join us and let's work on it together. And we might just be able to save our country without firing a shot. And that's what our goal is.
I was really excited to see Florida take a strong state stance against the second assassination attempt on former President Trump. Right. I mean, they stood unified, strong, And they basically said, we're going to do the investigating. The feds can do what they want, but we're going to do the investigating. And I just was really proud of them.
Yeah, and I don't know how well that will work in like Oregon or Washington, some very liberal states in the West. I certainly don't see it working in California under people like socialist Ronnie Newsom and others. But folks, you can look at California and see what's happened. In fact, my wife and I just a couple of days ago went to the movie Reagan, and I highly recommend it for all of you. Very true story. I was very close to a lot of things in the news during Reagan's tenure as president of the United States. I was even closer to his assassination attempt because I sued the person for which the Brady Bill was named. I sued on the Brady Bill, and it was named for James Brady, who was shot in the head during the assassination attempt in March of '81 against President Reagan. The crazy thing of it is they didn't even know he was shot for about 10 minutes. And it almost cost him his life because they didn't know he was shot, and then they hurried him to the hospital. But the thing of it is, the very issue that I sued over was the Brady Bill, a gun control scheme that required the sheriffs to enforce it. As a matter of fact, there were 5 Brady Bills scheduled to be passed 1 year after the other for a 5-year period that would have completely gutted the Second Amendment and made it disappear. They were going to completely destroy the Second Amendment. And if these sheriffs, the 7 of us that did this lawsuit, if we had not done it, the Second Amendment would be gone today, and sheriffs would be reporting to the federal government and probably the BATF, because they're the ones that came and brought us our marching orders. Folks, we still have work to do, and we can keep this peaceful, and we need your help, and we need you on board. So as far as sheriffs taking a strong stand, every time they've won. And I could tell you incident after incident after incident where this has happened. And how about this one? I'll tell you one right now.
Okay.
Do you remember Pastor Rodney Howard Brown during the COVID-19 fiasco, farce, whatever you want to call it, the COVID-19 lies? Do you remember that he got arrested in Florida, in Tampa?
No, I was more familiar with the California.
He did. Okay. And he's a very good man. I've been out there to his church. I absolutely love this man. And I love going to his church. He was arrested by Sheriff Cronister for just having church. Nothing else. Conducting church in the land of the brave and home of the free in the United States of America. A preacher was arrested for having church on Sunday. Now, let's look at Sheriff Glenn Hamilton in New Mexico. A pastor in his county came to him and said, "Sheriff, I am not closing my church. I don't care what the government says, because the government does not run our church. Jesus Christ runs our church." And so the Pastor Caleb Cooper said, "I want to know, Sheriff, what you'll do to protect us, protect me and our congregation from being shut down." And Sheriff Hamilton responded, "Pastor Cooper, if it takes me having to go to jail myself, then so be it. But I will do everything in my power to protect you and your church." So here came the state to shut them down, and they were met by Sheriff Hamilton, and he informed them that he had already deputized every member of that church and congregation, and that they are now working under his authority, including the pastor, and that this church will remain open per the order of the sheriff's office. And indeed, the state left, and they never came back. And Pastor Cooper was never shut down, not a single day, not a single minute. And America and liberty won because we had a sheriff with the guts, the courage, and the creativity to do his job. And so my question to all of you now, which sheriff do you want in your community? Which sheriff do you want serving and protecting all of you? I think it's even obvious for Democrats and Republicans alike and everybody in between, or maybe you're no party, or maybe you don't vote and you don't get involved, like the Amish. We've been very busy defending the Amish because the government will attack them for not pasteurizing their milk. Yes. They've destroyed many farms. They've put some in jail. And I'm asking all of you, who's going to defend them? Who's going to defend parents that want to go to school board meetings and find out what's going on? Recently in Arizona, a lady was arrested because she complained about the city attorney doing a poor job. She was arrested. And so this stuff has to stop, folks, and it's not going to happen without us having to educate our police and sheriffs to what their job really is. And folks, where do we see what the purpose of all government is? No, it's not the preamble. That's not specific enough. The preamble's really nice. It's got 6 platitudes about generalities of what government does and what's it for, a more perfect union. What does that mean? Well, yeah, okay, I understand that's an ultimate goal. But the Declaration of Independence tells us all what government is for. What's the purpose of government? And right after this wonderful, poetic, we were endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's actually the way to say it. Unalienable rights. Chief among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the next line. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. My dear friends, all government, from the dog catcher all the way down to your president, their purpose is to protect your God-given rights, to protect civil rights. I'll go with Martin Luther King's term, civil rights, folks. That's what we're here to protect, your civil rights. And do our police even know what your civil rights are? If they don't, how are they going to know to protect them? If you don't know what they are, how are you going to know to demand that they stay intact and that the police protect your civil rights? So education is the key at this point. You cannot be saved in ignorance. Jefferson warned us over and over that if you expect to be ignorant and free, you expect what never was and what never will be. Folks, join us at the CSPOA.
Well, I know that. So I was a member, and then of course life gets a hold of you. You just don't pay attention to renewals unless they're automatic.
Well, if you renew now, we will remind you once a year or once a month, however you do it. But even a 1-year membership is only $99.
Yes.
So divide 12 into 99. What is that, about $8.50? I don't know. I'm not a mathematician, but I know it's about there. So folks, get involved with us in this holy cause. Yes. Okay? I don't see any place else. The county sheriff, America's Last Hope. I wrote that in 2009. Mm-hmm. And that's a book that's available about this, because I even saw back then the writing on the wall about the destruction of America. And what really took me over the bar on that were 3 people running for president in 2008. And that was Obama, Hillary, and John McCain. And I said, there has to be something better. There has to be someplace else besides looking at these corrupt politicians for liberty. And turned out the title of that book came into my head. I wrote it, and it has sold over 100,000 copies since then. And it's still selling pretty good. Mostly a book doesn't last that long, but it is. I need to update it. I haven't updated it yet because I talk about a $9 trillion debt in that book.
Yeah, we've come a long way.
Celeste, isn't that a joke? Yeah.
Yeah, and they keep printing it. We can't print it and we wouldn't want to. Most of us live within our budget, but they
Yeah.
don't live within their budget. So, is there
Well, it is.
anything else you want to talk about today?
Oh, we can go on to everything. You're the assassination attempts on Trump, and also Trump in general. I have tried to get it to him that he needs to defend his conviction as a felon. Then they're going to keep using that against him. And
Yeah.
Kamala used it against him in the debate. And I didn't watch all the debate. I haven't watched any of the debates, but I watched the news afterwards. And I will tell you this, that Trump should have said, yes, I've been charged and convicted for over 30 different crimes. Martin Luther King was also arrested over 30 times. Would anybody in this country label him as a crook, as a criminal, or someone who stood for liberty? Folks, I cannot compare myself to Martin Luther King, but I will compare myself to the piece of history that was part of Martin Luther King's legacy. He was arrested over 30 times. I've been arrested over 30 times, and both of us stood up to corrupt government. I was arrested by corrupt government, and I will stand up and fight to make sure that none of you are victims of this corrupt government ever again. I stand with Martin Luther King for what he stood for, and I will stand again for what we all stand for, and that is individual liberty and civil rights. Corrupt government is who Martin Luther King was fighting against, and it's what I am fighting against. That is how he should have handled that. And I don't know why his handlers aren't getting this information to him, but I sure wish somebody would talk to him about this. Maybe they need to hire me to be his consultant on this and help him prepare for the next debate, because he could really shut the left up big time for what they've done, because there is no difference here. Government arrested Martin Luther King over 30 times, and he was actually in jail when he wrote a letter about how we all should obey just laws. We have a moral responsibility, a moral and legal responsibility to obey just laws. He wrote this from Birmingham County Jail. Then conversely, he said, we all have a moral responsibility and duty to disobey unjust laws. That applies to us today, folks. He was absolutely correct. So let's do, in fact, let me quote again from the Declaration of Independence. And this is the last line. The founding father said, for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. My dear friends, we must do likewise. And once again, I ask you to join us in this holy cause of liberty. We can't do it alone. Your sheriff can't do it alone. And America will not return to its constitutional foundation if we, the people, are not involved in the process. Join us, get involved, and we will see you every Wednesday as we take America back. And Celeste, thanks for having me.
Well, that's a great inspiration for all of us. I know that I'm going to re-sign up, and I hope that all of you join, because there is no time. Most of you follow me. You know the direness of the hour, and we really do not have a minute. We can't just sit and wait or wait for somebody else to stand up. It's time to have courage. It's time to get yourself off the couch, give up a hamburger, give up that coffee latte. Really, if you spend a week or 10 days of lattes, you're going to be able to support freedom. So do you want to live in a free country, or do you want to live in China? or something akin to that. That's what's on the line. So God bless you, Sheriff Mack, and you'll be seeing me on the computer here in a few minutes as soon as we get out there. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Celeste, and I look forward to being on with you again. Thank you for having me.
Okay. God bless and thank you.
See you.
God bless everybody. See you the next time on the Celestial Report.